How do you process what happened yesterday?
Well,
You said deliberate tactics.
yeah, from the Israeli army point of view, what they did was by the book. It was very deliberate
What did
tactics. They knew what they were doing it step by step.
What was the first thing they did?
The first thing they did, they reconnoitered. They found out how many people there were. They came through they reassured themselves that there wasn't anybody there with a machine gun who was going to mow them down, which they could have done easily, the way they were situated. They made sure that it was a ragtag group, that it wasn't, a mass of organized, determined people who are going to go through them.
And there were lots of internationals who would be softer.
They made sure that there were lots of
Palestinians.
internationals, so they couldn't just go in and break up everything. Then they lined themselves up in the narrowest point in the road, because if the road was wider, or if there were other places for people to go through the fields and go around them and go to their target, then it would be more difficult for them. Then they made sure they had one jeep lurking way behind us, so that they could catch us in a pincer movement if they had to. Then they started, when we got close enough, before we organized, they started by throwing a lot of the stun grenades right in our midst, intended to separate those up front from those in the back.
Now, could you be hit by one of those things?
Yes, of course. Actually, they were just throwing it by hand. They were not shooting it at us. In fact, one of them hit me in the hand.
So it's like a grenade.
And I immediately knew that it wasn't a rubber bullet, that there was no velocity in it.
It wasn't a tear gas.
It wasn't I thought it may be tear gas. I think one of them was. I don't think they used tear gas. But that was like a deliberate escalation.
And we were no threat to them at that point.
No threat, no.
I mean, at that point...
So then they separated us, and then they decided they were just going to let us there for a few minutes, and then they would just force us to disperse. They formed their line, and in Hebrew they were telling each other what to do next. And one of them says, "Go give the order, declare this a military zone. Enough of this fooling around," because that's when we started talking to them. And one of the leaders says, stop this, go get the military order and get them out. Around that time, the jeep came in behind us. The idea was to catch us in a pincer movement. First separate us from a lot of the young guys at the back, then surround us with a jeep on both sides, and there weren't enough of us to really surround. So the jeep decided to go through us, and that
broke you up as well.
That was the additional provocation, that if we stood our ground and didn't let the jeep through, then they can attack us from both sides, start beating or arresting.
And you had the police and the army working together?
Yes.
And do they have different...
Well, they didn't have really the police. They had what's called the Border Patrol. Border Patrol is part of the police force, but they're really more like army.
Then they brought the order?
Yeah, then they brought out the order, at which point I went up and says, let me see the order, let me see the order. What is this? This is in Hebrew. Who reads Hebrew? Give me something in Arabic. How insulting can you be? And the guy goes, never mind insulting. It's a closed military zone. So then I said, well, how long is the order for?
Did he know you were a lawyer?
Well, I'm not sure that he did. But this is, I don't know, it's for a week. It's till next Sunday.
He was making it, obviously went along.
Yes, he didn't know. It was just a facade. He knew that all he had was guns and power. And he was pretending to say, I have law on my side as well. And of course we were making fun of it, and you were saying, what is this,
No, were we in Area A?
Yes, we were.
So he shouldn't have been there.
Absolutely, he had no right to even be there.
He had no right to be there on that road.
Yeah.
We were in Area A.
The gun. And my point to him was, you don't have law on your side, all you have is guns. And then the second point was, what do you have the guns for? Certainly not for protection or defense. Here, we have nothing. You don't have anything.
Just on a picnic.
And then Paul was making just fun and a charade of the whole thing. And he says, well, for a whole week we can't go through. And the son says, no, you can come later.
So he started a bar.
And you're saying, well, supposing we had a picnic. I said, well, you can have a picnic, but not a demonstration. And he says, well, what's a demonstration? How do you define a demonstration? Well, 4, 5, 6 people. So how many exactly? Well, just not a demonstration. It's clear. There was nothing legal about it. They were not defending anything. They just wanted to prevent a peaceful demonstration from taking place.
And they didn't want us to get to the place.
These were their orders. And I'll add something else. I think they would have been very happy if there was no demonstration. They weren't looking to hurt people. They weren't looking to. They just get out of my face. Go back to wherever you came from. Let me continue to, oppress you the way I like, and don't make it difficult for both of us. Go. That's basically what they were going to say. And they were saying, we're being decent, we're being humane. Give us a chance.
That's what they were saying.
Yeah, they were saying, so far I've been Adamy so far. I've been a human being so far. Don't let me get nasty with you. They were saying, you started. You threw these grenades at us, and he said, well, I gave the order to stop it. I was the one who gave the order to stop it.
How many grenades do you
Talk
think
about who gave the order to start it.
No, I wasn't. This was another man who was engaged in conversation. Why are you doing this?
How many grenades do you think they threw?
On my film, I've got probably 7 or 8, maybe more, but 7 or 8.
Jonathan was saying they were doing that to divide us.
Yeah, it was a deliberate military tactic. Separate us, make us into smaller groups, isolate a few, find out who are the real troublemakers, hotheads, leaders, and if they don't submit, arrest them, take them out of the picture.
So you're trying to dissuade the Palestinian youth from...
No, we knew that what they really wanted was provoke, and then they'd be justified in shooting and killing. He says, don't. There's a peaceful demonstration. We don't even throw rocks. And that's, it's a whole big debate in the nonviolent community whether rocks are violence or not. But for me, from a tactical point of view,
you lose it when
you start throwing rocks. Because even though you don't consider it violence, for them, this is a deadly missile coming at me, gives me full authority to open fire. You're trying to kill me, David killed Goliath with a stone. This is a deadly weapon. It triggers the entire structure of security justifications that Israel carefully builds up. I mean, what the Palestinians are doing is Holocaust, Auschwitz, it's Hitler, it's 2,000 years of Christian anti-Semitism. It's the whole world against us poor Jews. And I'm not going to allow them an easy way to trigger that.
What's the specific issue that we were engaged in then, in that village?
Well, the specific issue is the building of the wall. People don't know in the West that the wall is still continuing to be built. And they make it look like we've built the wall and immediately suicide bombing stopped. The wall is still being built now.
And where is it being built in that village?
Right through the middle of Beit Jala, with houses and trees on both sides. Palestinian houses and trees on both sides. It's really a wall to enclose and bunch up most of Beit Jala village. Yes, a few people are left on the other side, but then they are easy to isolate, separate. They have to go maybe 20 minutes all the way to a gate somewhere else just to go around to enter the town of Beit Jala for their services. Or if they are already in Beit Jala, they have to go 20 minutes way out of town, maybe even get a permit to get to their trees and fields, or relatives on the other side of the wall.
So irrespective of the green line, you're saying the wall doesn't follow the area A or AB?
Oh, absolutely not.
It's
Absolutely not.
so it's a fiction.
The whole point about the wall is that it is being built inside the West Bank, in and between. If you see some of the early maps of where they wanted the wall, they also wanted it not just between the West Bank and to the west and Israel, but also on the east side, cutting off most of the Jordan Valley. And I think the Americans succeeded in nixing that one. Says, don't be crazy. Why should we be building the wall on the eastern side? You already have borders with mines and everything else between you and Jordan. What are you doing? What are you walling off there other than empty land that you want to prevent the Palestinians from reaching?
So do you think we're just protesting yesterday something that's pointless and inevitable? Are we blowing into the wind or trying to stop the tide coming in? Or do you think that we can really make a difference?
No, I absolutely think we can make a difference. Absolutely. You see, we have a number of tasks. Number one, we have to break the narrative. We have to make it clear that the issue is not poor Israelis trying to defend the women and children from suicide bombers who are, in a defensive posture. These are deliberately powerful army that is trying to disrupt the life of Palestinians, even within what little remains of Palestine. So this is very important to do. And to do that, again, this is the beauty of nonviolence. You don't need guns. In fact, guns are counterproductive. Even stones are counterproductive. The most powerful gesture is to stand there saying, I'm not trying to hurt you.
So we rewrite the narrative.
The first thing is you rewrite the narrative. Number two is you really assert your hope and your faith that justice is what prevails. That the issue is not a power interest of who's more powerful. Because clearly the Israelis are more powerful. But you're saying your power does not create right. You have guns, you have cement and concrete and walls. You can have a very heavy, powerful presence, but that doesn't have the last word. There is hope, there is law, there is morality, ultimately there is God.
That's your motivation.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that was accomplished yesterday.
And do you feel we're moving in that direction, or do you think it's going to get worse before it gets better?
We are definitely moving in that direction, but it will get worse before it gets better. In other words, yes and yes.
In what way do you think it's going to get worse? Because we need to know how to handle that.
I think it will get worse. I think that as Israel feels challenged in its narrative,
And internationally
and locally, it's going to strike back. It's going to use more and more violence. I mean, if we were a little bit more successful in Beit Jala yesterday, they would have started shooting.
With rubber bullets or real bullets?
Escalating. You see, that's part of the doctrine.
Right.
You start with rubber bullets, and if that doesn't stop us, then with real bullets.
And
if bullets don't stop us, they're calling the helicopter gunships.
They are real
All for
bullets.
non-violence. All
Absolutely.
in response to non-violence.
Absolutely.
They're not really rubber bullets. I've seen the old rubber bullets.
Oh.
They were very thick rubber with a metal ball inside. Now they're bullets with a plastic coating.
Yes. There have been many fatalities from these so-called rubber bullets. Rubber bullets is a misnomer. You think of something that bounces off of you. This is something that goes through your skull and lodges in your brain.
Where do you see America in all of this? I mean, yesterday, Axelrod spoke for Obama last night, and he said, quote, Israel has insulted the United States.
Well, it's
all rhetoric? Do you think it's going
it's
somewhere?
interesting because I think America is in a difficult position. At least at one level, it has to face incredible Israeli arrogance. And America has its own problems with pride, national pride. So when somebody actually insults you and spits in your face, I think that is a problem. But I think America's problem is even worse. they are really on a trajectory where Obama's plan of winning the hearts and minds of the Muslim and Arab world are being thoroughly frustrated. I mean, he gave a wonderful speech in Cairo about how he wants to reach out to the Muslim world. And then, well, what's important to the Muslim world, a big part of it is Palestine. So he needs to pretend he's doing something about Palestine. And when the Israelis are not even allowing him to carry on with that pretense through their arrogance, they're really, come on.
I mean, what happened this week then?
Well, I think what happened this week was that the Americans are sending a clear signal to Israel. Look, we may not, be serious about pressuring you, but you can't make us look like a fool. You can't insult us, like what they did with Biden. After the U.S. had made it very clear, we're going to twist everybody's arm. We're going to force the Palestinians to come and sit with you, even though you haven't stopped settlements.
In proximity talks.
In proximity talks, and we're using every effort we have to push them. Just don't do anything to embarrass us, at least the next few days. And then Biden comes, and the first thing he said, you know what, we're going to build some more, and we're going to build them in Jerusalem. Just to make the point that, we don't listen to you, we don't listen to international opinion, we don't care about the Arab and Muslim world, we don't care about international law, and furthermore, we don't care about your reputation or your agenda or your attempts to cozy up to the Arab world. And now Biden says, well, I still love you anyway, and will you forgive me if I tell you it's really in your own best interest to stop that? He actually used those words in his speech, which I read. He was making a puke,
But then it was followed up with Clinton, raised the bar a bit.
Yeah, it was followed up with Clinton saying, look, you can't have a more Zionist, a more dedicated supporter than me and Biden and actually Obama. But look, allow us to play this game with the Arabs and the Muslims. Don't embarrass us.
So why does Axelrod up the ante yesterday? Is it part of a plan, do you think, on the
No, I think it's very clear. He's spending so much time and energy trying to convince 1 billion Muslims who are skeptical to begin with that he is serious about solving the Palestinian problem. And the faltering, really weak steps he's taking in that direction to keep up that pretense, Israel is frustrating just out of, basically juvenile arrogance. And they're doing it in an insulting way.
Think they're going to keep getting away with it?
You see, you remember when I told you about one of the great signs of hope is the level of Israeli arrogance. This is it. When the Bible says pride cometh before the fall, that's exactly what the Bible is talking about. That Israel is so arrogant, so proud, that it's going to lead to its own destruction. And we see it. Just this month we've seen 2 incidents of just brash, foolish, just irrational arrogance and pride costing Israel tremendously on the international scene. Whether it's with Dubai sending all these Mossad agents after a single person, violating international law, protocol, diplomatic relations. Here's one Arab country, Dubai, that on the quiet is making things very easy for Israel, is allowing trade, is selling them gas, is going out on a limb to create good relations with Israel. And you go and embarrass them and assassinate somebody on their sovereign soil and do it in a botched up fashion.
Before hotel cameras.
Before hotel cameras, and you get 26 of your agents,
plastered all over the internet.
It's just a case of nothing but arrogance and pride. And then you go and insult the United States, the vice president. I mean, it's one thing to insult the Turkish generals, which you do in the Turkish army. Your only strategic ally, basically, in the area. Deliberately, insult them. And then you go and install the vice president who's here as your friend and who's trying to do his best to pretend that the peace process is still ongoing. It really is a case study in how pride destroys the arrogant person.
And that's what gives you hope and perseverance.
That was one of the signs of hope that I mentioned. I had it on the top of my list of the signs of hope. What gives me hope, of course, is much as other things. It's my belief in a just God who has created the universe in such a way that evil and oppression cannot continue forever. But you always want to see signs justifying that hope. You can give historical precedents. You can talk about Christ himself. At the moment when he appeared to be most vulnerable, with his followers scattered and him being caught and nailed at the cross, at his weakest, he was actually at his strongest. He actually conquered death itself by dying. This paradigm, this way of looking at the upside down logic, that God's logic is not like ours. The pundits and the analysts look at the situation and they see that one side is totally in control, totally powerful, technologically advanced, armed to the teeth, has control and power in so many areas. They can dictate everything, even dictate to the United States. And you say, we can do nothing. And then, you know, the response of faith is no. God is more powerful. Even in Muslim theology, the words Allahu Akbar don't mean God is great. Literally, Allahu Akbar means God is greater than. He's greater than the guns. He's greater than the tanks. He's greater than the wall. He's greater than Washington and Tel Aviv. He's greater than the Merkava tank and the M16. God is greater because he is the sovereign God of the universe. And ultimately, it's his will which will prevail and not the visible material power of the oppressor.
And our job is to do justice, love mercy, and walk humbly.
He is a God who asks us to do justice, love mercy, and walk humbly before you, God.
Jonathan, thank you.